What is a tzaddik?
What is a tzaddik? There are two kinds of people, basically. The Rebbe is talking about the type of person who is a tzaddik, who is the rare individual. Most people are not tzaddikim. And that's the way it's meant to be. It's not that we're failing if we're not tzaddikim. The difference is this. As the Rebbe concluded that little segment we just saw, the purpose of everything is to make the lower world, earth, comfortable for God, or a dwelling place for God. Now, how do you do that? Obviously, you got to do two things. You've got to bring the world as it is, with all of its ugliness or whatever. You've got to bring it up a couple of notches so that it can be fit to be a dwelling place for God. And then you have to bring godliness from wherever it resides down to earth. So it's both raising up the world and bringing down godliness. The non-tzaddik, who is basically in touch with the ugliness of the world, who has a little ugliness in themselves, their job, obviously, is to raise up the world. The tzaddik's job is to bring godliness into that world once it becomes receptive. I think the Rebbe mentioned something about it all depends on how receptive we are. So we make the world receptive, the tzaddik brings godliness into the world. So a number of things about a tzaddik. Number one, he is not cursed with unholy impulses and selfish motivations and all the stuff that we all suffer from. The other thing about a tzaddik is that he doesn't need to be here, he doesn't need to be born in order to fix his own soul. So he doesn't get the satisfaction of seeing the results of his work while he's still alive. Which I think in simple words, if we take, demystify it. The tzaddik cannot think or plan or work with a short-term goal. His has to be a multi-dimensional, like people say, what is a Jew? A Jew is someone who can make another Jew, have a Jewish child. And even that doesn't prove you're so Jewish. If you can have a Jewish grandchild, that shows you're really into being a Jew, right? So the tzaddik cannot measure his success by one generation. That's a less mystical way of saying it. So he doesn't know that he is successful until the third generation shows that it was motivated or impressed or inspired by what he did. So the Rebbe can't be thinking, what effect am I having on my listeners? He's got to be thinking, what effect am I having on my listeners' grandchildren? That's a heavy responsibility.
So when you say that, then, does that mean a tzaddik knows that he is a tzaddik?
He knows he's a tzaddik, and he knows he's having a good effect. So it's not like he's wondering whether he's wasting his time. The question is he having the effect that he needs to have? It's good. He's got good students, they're listening, they're learning, they're behaving, but is this going to affect people around? So it's like, it's not enough to make your student a good student. You got to make your student so good that they will become teachers who will have students who will be able to teach. Now you're thinking 3 generations ahead.
Right.
I don't know whether they're ever thinking 10 generations ahead or whatever, and it depends on how ambitious the tzaddik is. But
does this answer the question? If you don't mind me, I just want to see if we can get to that. Does this already answer the question, or?
Yeah, it does, because I didn't realize, well, for me it answers the question, because I didn't realize that a tzaddik knows that they are a tzaddik. I thought it's just something that they find out later on, like in the world to come when they pass away, that that's something that Hashem tells them, oh yeah, and by the way, when you were on earth, you were a tzaddik. I didn't realize that that's something that they knew before they were born, right? Is that?
They know their mission, they know their soul, they know why they're here. The question is, did they accomplish? And again, accomplish is not something inside of them, because they're not here to fix themselves. So how do they know if they're accomplishing?
Right.
I mean, we should be able to tell if we're accomplishing because we're becoming better.
Right.
If we think more selflessly, if we get rid of our ego, we'll know.
Right.
But how does a tzaddik know?
Right. Well, we often hear people refer to other people as, oh, he's such a tzaddik, he's such a righteous man. Well, do we know that for sure? Like, we're saying that about somebody we know personally.
We're using the word loosely. We don't really mean a tzaddik.
Right.
A literal tzaddik.
Right. Somebody can be righteous without being necessarily a tzaddik, right?
Yeah, you can use the word kind of loosely. You know, any guy you like is a tzaddik, anyone you don't like is not.
Right. All right.
But there are other ways to use that word tzaddik. I mean, this was one of the innovations, was it not, of the Alter Rebbe in Chabad, is that this understanding of what a tzaddik is.
Yeah,
but if you look at other texts, Jewish texts, older texts, the tzaddik, the word is used much more loosely.
Yes.
It can be used in that loose sense, quite. So.
Yeah, mothers always saying to their kids, you know, you're such a tzaddik, you know.
How does a person understand whether they're supposed to be bringing the world up or bringing themselves down in terms of what level you're at? Do you focus on yourself, or does a person know when they get to that certain point, okay, now I'm supposed to start giving what I know back down, as we talked about bringing the two together? And a tzaddik is, you know, can someone who comes from the bottom attain that level of being a tzaddik, and then his role change and start?
It's very rare that a non-tzaddik becomes a tzaddik. Very rare. So that's not something to look forward to, or to hold your breath.
Does that mean a Baal Tshuva, probably? Baal Tshuva couldn't become a tzaddik?
If you're not born a tzaddik, it's not likely to become a tzaddik. But that doesn't mean that we don't somehow bring godliness into the world as well as elevate the world. So we do have both roles. But for the tzaddik, his I don't know if primary or only role is to bring godliness down to the world.
All right, so based on what was just said before about the tzaddik being a person who doesn't have these struggles that the layman has, and how he spends his time bringing other people up, my question is that, obviously making a comparison, is that similar to, let's say, the role of a priest or a pope in Christianity or something like that, where they're almost like a spiritual representative, where they don't have the same struggles, and they take confessions and things like that, where they kind of represent the people and help bring up the people?
Comparisons to other religions is always a little bit confusing. But I think the model is based on that. The Moses, right? What was Moshe's role? Was he there to perfect himself? Did he need time to sit and study, go off to yeshiva, you know, give himself a little...
Right, but Moshe had his struggles as well.
Yeah, the struggles of a tzaddik, not the struggles of a non-tzaddik.
What's the difference between the two of those?
Oh, the difference is the non-tzaddik has a struggle between right and wrong, between good and bad. The tzaddik struggle is between good and gooder, good and better, right and righter, because he has no unholy instincts. So his holy instincts, of course, can always get greater and bigger and so on. So he wanted to get closer to God, even after having stood on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. He eventually asked God, you know, I want to see you, I want to know you more, but it wasn't, you know, in exchange for ego stuff or that kind of. So the tzaddik is basically a person who has not, his soul has not changed by coming down into a body and by living on earth. Whereas our soul is very vulnerable and subjected to the human personality and the human shtick and all the failings and so on and so forth. And that's why the tzaddik can serve as a model, because he doesn't have the same struggles. On the other hand, the Baal Tshuva is in some way greater than the tzaddik because he does have the struggle. So it's a
The
trade-off.
situation of Moshe hitting the rock, let's say, that was a situation between good and gooder?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good example, but yeah.
Can the world not function without tzaddikim? Why can't we just have these, the lower individuals?
Because that would leave us without a clear compass. You know, we're trying to get closer to God, we're trying to get better. Well, what's better? What does better look like? So unless we have someone who is better, we're treading water. And that's very frustrating. And the one thing, I think that in that little talk, the Rebbe says, the one thing God doesn't want us to do is be frustrated. give us a job without definition and have us struggle. But I want to say something really, I think, fundamental on this whole thing. The Rebbe was talking about a tzaddik continuing to have an effect and thereby being alive, right? With the tzaddik, because his life while on earth was completely dedicated to his students and to his children, what kind of life can he have in heaven? That's why we're told that if his children are alive, then he is still alive on earth. His purpose on earth is still ongoing. So he's alive on earth. He no longer exists on earth. Other people who are not tzaddikim, since their life on earth was not devoted to others, it was devoted to self-perfection, self-elevation, whatever, right? So when they go to heaven, they're fine. Life in heaven is great.
Can that be said about all tzaddikim, non-tzaddikim in this world, that everything that we're doing pretty much is for ourselves, for the most part?
For the most
like
part.
even if you're really trying and you see yourself doing for others and really going out of your way for other people, for the most part, are we really out for ourselves?
If you're
Sounds so
really
I'm here for me, and that's it.
It's true. Right, yeah. If you're really devoted to others, to the community or so on, then that becomes the definition of your life. Most of us, we're devoted to our family. That's our life. We're devoted to a few friends. But to say we are devoted completely to others, that wouldn't be right.
So we're partially alive after we're dead.
No, we're
I mean, on earth, we're
right,
partially alive, right? At
We're
least
completely
in part.
alive in heaven.
Right.
Because our soul is comfortable there, and it's perfected itself, and it's achieved what it needs to, what it needed to. So we're completely alive in heaven, which is great. But a tzaddik doesn't need to be alive in heaven.
Partner with Rabbi Friedman. Visit itsgoodtoknow.org/support.